All right. So I've just been to another mind, body, spirit market fair, and I thought to tell you a few things about the readings that I did there, because a lot of times people ask me, what kind of things can you see from the hands? And probably an easy way to answer that is to tell you what I saw in the hands of people I looked at over the weekend. And it's important to remember that when I'm doing these mind, body, spirit fairs, these are only 15-minute or 30-minute hand reading sessions. So they're not very long. And doing hand reading consultation with people in that environment, it's not a particularly private environment either, because you've got a booth and a stall in a large room. There's lots of other people in the room, people selling stuff, other readers like tarot readers and clairvoyants and so on. So it's not a fantastically private space. So it's quite hard to go into great detail and great depth about personal matters in a space like that. Partly because you don't have the time, but partly because it's just really not the right environment or atmosphere for it. But nonetheless, it's a very interesting space to be in because as a practicing hand reader, it's an interesting challenge to have someone come up to you and on the spot, you have to look at their hands and work out what the main features of their hand are, what the main features of their life are, and tell them something interesting and useful and helpful in a short period of time. So there's kind of an interesting challenge in that regard for hand readers to be doing that in that kind of space. So anyway, I thought I'd just tell you a few things that I see. So when I'm looking at the hands in this kind of short space, I look at skin texture, fingerprint patterns, palmatomatoglyphic patterns, and if there's any standout lines or if there's any standout finger features, like the fingers are bent or short or long, or and the condition of the thumb. Those are things that I tend to look at. I don't look in the details of the lines. I don't look for anything to do with prediction or timing of events. I don't think you can do that accurately from the hand anyway, but I'm not looking for those kind of things. I'm certainly not looking for fate, fortune, babies, and marriages. No matter how many times people ask me, that's all the mythology of hand reading, which I've talked about in another video, and you can explore that on my channel. But I do talk about the personality factors. And when you're looking at personality and character and temperament from the hand, there are some features of the hand which are incredibly important to look at. And the first and foremost of those is the skin texture, the fingerprint patterns, and the palmar dermatoglyphics, because all of those things are a function of the skin ridges that we find in the palm. Now, as we know, there's only the palm of the hand and the soles of the feet that have this particular kind of skin ridge formation. The ridges make the roughness of the skin, which is what we use for assessing skin texture. The ridges make up the shape of the patterns of the fingerprint patterns, whether those loops are arches or whorls, and then occasionally you find patterns in the palm of the hand as well. So when we see these things, we can look at those and get assessment of what they are and say something about each of those things. Now, the virtue of focusing mainly on the fingerprint patterns or the dermatoglyphic patterns is that they don't change over time. So these are fundamental characteristics of the person. They're going to be like that, whether they like it or not, and they're not going to change because the fingerprints don't change. Those are kind of fundamental characteristics that will be with that person throughout their whole life. And so therefore they describe very distinctive traits and orientations, which will manifest in very clear and distinct ways in their lives in terms of their attitudes, their values, their psychology, or even the job that they do. And so that's what's interesting. So I always find out what job someone does when I look at their hands because I kind of make a correlation of these things as I go along and build up a picture of different patterns and what kind of hands and what kind of people and what kind of jobs you expect to find those in. So the first woman who came to me, she had a fire quality skin texture, which shows somebody who wants to be very active and very busy and is chopping and changing and always on the go and always doing things. And when you start with talking about the skin texture with people, that's obviously often the characteristic about themselves that they know most about themselves. You know, if they've got fire skin texture, they say, oh, yes, I'm a very busy person. I'm always doing things. If they have an air skin texture, yes, yes, yes. Finding out information, talking to people, that's really important to me. Or if they've got water skin texture, yes, how people feel, that's my most predominant interest in what's going on around me. So the skin texture is a really good way to gauge where that person's at, how they interact with the world and what their interface with the world is, because the skin texture shows something of what we tune into and pick up around from the world around us. Now, this woman had 6 arch fingerprint patterns. a loop of seriousness, and two loops of mystery, which is a loop that is found in this part of the hand down here. So she had two of those in the hands. Those are never interesting from a vocational point of view, but they always show someone's particular interest in the mysterious, the occult, the hidden, esoteric knowledges, and that's always the case when you find that pattern. That pattern has a sort of, person has a preoccupation with those things. But from a vocational point of view, you've got the fire skin texture, the arches, and the loop of seriousness. That tells you an awful lot about the kind of work that the person does. First of all, the loops of seriousness. This is a career motivated person. This is somebody who wants to have a proper job, doing a proper career, and they're very serious about it, very hardworking. And we already see that from the fire skin texture. This is a very industrious, active, energetic person who likes enthusing other people, but she's got arches. So what does she want to do? She wants to provide, she wants to protect, she wants to support, she wants to nurture. And arches, and this combination, are very commonly found in teachers and social workers and carers. But she, in fact, was an early childhood educator. And so as we were going through the hand reading and I'm explaining all these different motivations for her, it became clear to her that I was talking about what she did for a job. Um, and that's how you work those things out. You just do it from that way around. So the next person who came was an older lady, age 77, and she had water skin texture, so completely opposite type of skin texture. And she had four whorls, a very short low set air finger, a loop of Sirius, and again a loop of mystery. A loop of mystery was the theme of the day. I got loads of those on this particular day. Not particularly surprising seeing loops of mysteries in an environment where there are clairvoyants and tarot readers and astrologers and hand readers, because that's the kind of esoteric, mystical stuff that people with loops of mystery like. So I didn't dwell on that particularly, but I always like to talk about it with them because it's there, it's distinctive. Only occurs on about 5% of hands, so it's not that common. But it's an interesting pattern. It's always directive if they have it. But this woman had a water skin texture, and the water skin texture is completely different from people with a fire skin texture, and it's very, very smooth. You can't feel the ridges, and this always shows somebody who's interested in people. She wants harmony in the relationship she has with people. She wants harmony and beauty in the environment in which she's in. She wants something spiritual in her life, and most of what people with water skin texture, they want to live by water. And so you can talk about this with this, but and this is again, this is how they see themselves. This is how they understand themselves. She's got whorls on the ring fingers and the index fingers, so these two fingers on both hands, which is the usual first place to find these two fingers, those whorl fingerprint patterns, primarily on the ring finger, secondly on the index finger. So this is basically showing the kind of interest, the aesthetic interest again when it's on the ring finger, and then desire for personal autonomy and freedom and independence when it's on the index finger. With this woman, with this very short low set air finger, we talked a lot about her relationship with her father and the relationship and the childhood issues that brought up. So the when you see that in the hand, you will always end up having a conversation about childhood experiences, how the family operated, and the poverty of the relationship to the father in particular, and the struggles for independence that she would have had by virtue of having whorls, and innately a sense of independence, but the lack of support and encouragement from her father. So that was a much more psychological reading for this particular person. With the other person, there's a vocational element to it. So the next person, another woman, also had water skin texture, but she had six whorls, a loop of good humor on both hands, and a loop of sensitivity a loop of serious intent on both hands. So she had both the interdigital loops, the loop of seriousness being here, the loop of good humor or the loop of playfulness down here. She had that on both hands. It's quite unusual to have both those patterns in a hand, and it's quite unusual to have both those patterns on both of the hands as well. Very often you might have one or other of them on each of the hands, but not both. So what do we know about this person? Again, um, well, we can guess. We know immediately from the fact she's got six whorls, particularly if it's whorls on the thumbs and the index fingers, as it was in this case, that she's self-employed. So this is somebody who's working for themselves, but they've got water skin texture. So it's all about beauty. It's all about aesthetics. It's about harmony. It's about people. It's about making things look good again. Um, and she's also somebody who follows her heart, follows her passion, but takes it really seriously. So this is generally, you find this on the combination in people who want to make a career out of a hobby or turn their passion and enthusiasm into work. And that's exactly what she did. So she makes curtains and blinds. she's been doing it for 40 years, and that's her thing is to make the things that make a room beautiful in the window coverings. And she's self-employed. And so this is again a fantastic illustration of how these different features conspire together to create the vocational choices that she's made. So when you're reading the hands, you're talking about this is what you're interested in, this is what this is what your needs are, this is what you're like, this is the kind of motivation that you have, and then you put them all together, and then you can work out what it is that someone's doing for a job, for example. All right. And that's in 15 minutes. That was a 15-minute hand reading to work that out. I always say to people, if you can't work out what job someone does from looking at the hands, you probably haven't studied hand reading properly. Never mind all this fortune telling and prediction stuff, which is all very hit and miss and very problematic and for many, many reasons. But if you're a good hand reader, you can work out what job they do. Why shouldn't we be able to do that? If the hand is an expression of who you are, and work is one of the main things that we do in our lives for 8 hours a day, for 5 days a week, for maybe 30, 40 years, we should be able to identify that from the hand. That's something that's a major part of somebody's life. So that's why I'll focus on that aspect. So the next hand reading, what was that? She had air skin texture. So again, this time we're talking about communication, talking about the need for mental stimulation and mental interest and so on and so forth. Three whirls, loop of good humor, separate air and earth lines. So again, with the motivation, we can see that from the interdigital loop. The personal psychology, we get that from the whirls. The interest in is from the air skin texture, shows what she's interested in. She's interested in ideas, information, and communication. And then the separated air and earth line, well, that often shows a problematic upbringing and a problematic childhood and a disrupted or broken family in some kind of way. So that was another part of that conversation as well. Another woman came along and she had also had water skin texture, three whirls, but she had a loop of inspiration, quite a funnily located one, something like that, on one hand, and a double loop in the water quadrant on the other hand, and the passive hand. Really, really interesting. This was a Māori woman too. And when I saw her hand, I immediately started talking about the double loop in the water quadrant and the loop of inspiration. I just knew that was the most important thing to look at in the hand. I mean, I can't tell you how I knew that. It's more like this product of experience, really. And I asked her, do you have a contact with the spirit world in some kind of way? And the loop of inspiration can kind of gives that access to other dimensionalities. And she did, and that was what she has prophetic dreams. She talks to spirits. She finds portals and she offers prayers and opens portals or closes portals as needs be. So she's a Māori woman who's deeply invested in Māori spirituality. But she also works for the council. And she worked for the local council. And what her job was, her department she was in, was about cleaning the health and condition of the rivers, cleaning up the rivers, cleaning up the waterways in this part of New Zealand, for all different pollution, from farm effluent, and that sort of thing as well. She had water skin texture and very spiritual. So she had a kind of both things going on here: the practicalities, the concern for the water element, and concern for the environment, but with this kind of loop of inspiration, providing this kind of inspirational, mystical, spiritual dimension to what she was doing as well. So here again, we're looking at something which is like a particular talent or ability that she has, which is really quite rare because that loop, the loop of inspiration, only occurs in about 1% of hands. Very rare pattern. And she's doing a very mundane job, but in a very spiritual way. And then that's another example. I had another woman who um, had a fire skin texture with a double loop, lots of double loops. She had double loops on the index finger and the middle finger, long index finger with a whirl on it, two whirls on the ring fingers, and double loops on the thumb. Oh, and animal affinity triadics in the passive hand and a loop of seriousness in the active hand as well. So this was a really interesting case because this woman was half Māori, and she had a double loop on the middle finger, and that's always very interesting when you find a double loop on the middle finger. The double loop on the middle finger as I explain in my book, The Palmistry of Fingerprints, is very often seen in people who have a dual sense of culture and dual sense of history. And I see that a lot in Māori people here in New Zealand, um, particularly Māori people who've been brought up in a very Western European way and have kind of, and then only in later life kind of come to reconnect with their Māori heritage. And then so the double loop there kind of articulates the kind of attempt that they need to make to integrate those two different cultural strands. The whorls on the ring fingers were very important, and the fire skin texture very important as well. And those are the things that showed that she was a photographer. So photography is all to do with light. Light is all by fire. Long ring fingers to do with art, presentation, and creativity. And whorls on the ring fingers are always going to give that kind of interest in something artistic. And then the animal affinity chirology, which is, for those of you who know me, is kind of relatively new discovery for me, but quite commonly seen in those who have find a lot of joy, get a lot of joy and pleasure from being around and being with animals. And she had that marked in her hand too. So this is again an example of the various hand features that can show what kind of work somebody does, various hand features that show the kind of someone's inclinations and interests and also something of their philosophy or political ideologies, depending on where the fingerprint patterns are found. So that I think gives you a good idea. That's just what I one of the one day I hand readings I'm looking at on one day on the weekend, and that, some of those hand readings were half an hour, some were 15 minutes. But even in those short times, you get to find out about things like their personality, their psychology, their motivations. You can work out what job they do, what kind of childhood traumas they may have experienced, whether the family was broken up, whether there was a difficult or abusive relationship with the father, something of their special skills or abilities or talents that they have. And that's a kind of good broad base of the kind of things that you can see readily from the hand. I didn't see anything health-wise in this hand. Sometimes you get health indications as well, which can be obvious from the hand. But in all of these cases, because they're short readings, it's only kind of like an introduction. It's like a glimpse into what is going on in that person. And in those kind of spaces, that's probably enough. The proper reading takes about 2 to 3 hours to go through the entire hand and describe the sort of depths of the person's psychology. So that requires a different kind of space to do that. Um, so it's profound. I mean, people go away from a 15-minute reading, kind of feel seen and understood, and like, wow, that was amazing. They hit the nail right on the head. And people go away from a 2.5 hour reading with a sort of sense of complete transformation about who they are, completely new developing awareness of the formative patterns of what it makes up to make them be who they are, and explored in a kind of very thorough and contextual way. And that is very, very revelatory for people. And that's kind of why I say it's not fortune telling, it's self-revelation. So if you want to find out more about what I'm talking about, if this is all new to you, there are plenty of videos on my YouTube channel you can watch. There's a whole series explaining the basics of what they're all about. Or you can get my book, The Palmistry of Fingerprint Patterns. That basically is a good primer for explaining the meaning of all the fingerprint patterns, which I've been talking about. So as I said, in these short readings, 15 minutes or 30 minutes, I primarily concern myself with the skin texture, the fingerprint patterns, and the palmar dermatographs, because these are the features of the hand that don't change. These are the markers of your unique identity they are consistent motivational forces that will be with you for the whole of your life. And if you know what those are, then you can live a life that's in accord with the inner motivations and drive of what it is to be you. All right, don't forget to like and subscribe. More videos coming soon. And if you want to get my book, I'll put the link for it down below.